Thank you guys so much for joining Tyromper's No Limits podcast, episode number 7. Today, we are especially fired up. This is one woman that I have learned so much from on social media. Got the chance to meet her in real life here a couple of weeks ago in Vegas. She was a keynote speaker at a conference out here. This is a woman that's a 2-time TED Talk speaker. This is a woman that has hundreds of thousands of followers across all platforms, just published one of many of her books, helps and educates tens of thousands of people every day. A woman that's allegedly 50 years old, but she looks 32. We're going to ask her how she ages in reverse today. This is my great friend and guest that I'm honored to have on the podcast today, Cynthia Thurlow. Thank you so much for joining.
Of course. I'm so excited to be part of, the very beginning stages of your podcast. I'll be excited to see what it evolves into over time.
I appreciate that. You're definitely one of the first couple guests that I wrote down that I was hoping to get a chance to get on. I've learned personally so much from you. And so you've changed my life in a lot of ways. So I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for coming on.
Well, as I was saying to my husband this morning, I was like, Tyler is undoubtedly one of the most positive, grateful human beings I have ever met. And, I am inspired by how you live your life and how you choose to share insights into your personal and family life. Because for anyone that's on social media, if you're not following Tyler, you should be, for sure.
Well, I'll say the same about you. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anybody who follows me probably knows you, but for anybody out there who might be watching this who doesn't kind of know what you're about, could you give a little backstory and an intro?
Yeah. So I am allegedly trained as a nurse practitioner, and I've been a nurse practitioner for a very long time. Finished my program in Baltimore in 2000 and kind of pivoted away from ER medicine into cardiology, where I spent many, many years. I'm a total adrenaline junkie. And then, once I had children and, got married and started to realize I could, certainly get lots of stimulation outside of work, I started to dig a little deeper, looking at the things that were contributing to why my patient population was so sick. And for anyone that's listening, traditional allopathic medicine, we treat symptoms with prescription medications. That's generally how it works. We're not given a lot of information during our training about lifestyle medicine, nutrition, et cetera. You have to learn that all on your own. And so when I had a child, I still have a child who has life-threatening food allergies, that really started to shift my perspective. I was like, every time I went to see the pediatrician or the allergist, I was like, is there anything I'm giving to him, anything I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing? And it was always take the prescription, put it on his skin. It's nothing you're doing wrong. And so over time, I started to think maybe there's something to this that I'm not aware of. And, I kind of pivoted. Initially I thought I would do a doctoral program. I took, honest to God, one class and walked out and said, this is not for me. Then I pivoted and did a wellness coaching program. And that was certainly interesting, but I was like, this doesn't feel right. And then I actually read a book that changed my life called The Unhealthy Truth by Robin O'Brien. Have you read it?
I have not. Unhealthy, but I've read like 5 books you've recommended.
It's a book that literally changed the trajectory of my entire life. It made me angry to read it. I had no idea how much impact the processed food industry was having on our health, and certainly the net impact on our children. And so I kind of dove down a rabbit hole of looking at nutrition, and that is what lit me up. And that is what brought me to a point 5 years ago where I decided I could not write another prescription. And by no means am I being critical of my peers. They're doing amazing work. And especially in light of our current world circumstances with this pandemic. And so for me, I decided that even though I didn't have, this is embarrassing to admit, to a fellow entrepreneur, I had no business plan. I literally woke up one morning and said, I'm done working in the clinic and in the hospital. And I know that I can make a larger impact. And my husband, who's an engineer, thought I was nuts. He was very upset. You go from making a good salary to saying, I'm not sure how I'm going to pay. I don't know how I'm going to contribute to what we're doing. Took this leap of faith, and almost instantly within the first year and a half, I was very profitable. And I realized that I was completely changing my focus, really focused on nutrition and lifestyle medicine, and just started to attract a tribe. It was clearly there was a group of women that felt largely neglected and forgotten in middle age and beyond. And so that has really become the platform that I came from. And so that was where the shy introvert left clinical medicine to become an entrepreneur. And, as we were talking about before we started recording, it's 24/7. I mean, your job never ends. It's like constant, but it's so much more fulfilling in the respect that I have the ability to impact more lives, to reach more people, to be able to serve as a sounding board, to certainly slay limiting beliefs, and on so many levels to really serve as an example to my boys of something that you can create on your own. Like I say to people all the time, we have the gifts and the opportunities to be able to create different things in our lives. A lot of us lack the confidence. And so I wasn't lacking confidence. I may not have known a lot of other things about the entrepreneurial space, but I was confident I was going to be successful.
That's awesome. And wow, there's so many things we could dig into right now. I'll just say, even when I saw you speak at your conference, I brought my buddy Joey, and right away within 2 minutes, he goes, "Oh my gosh, like this woman is crazy. Like I need to read more." And then the two ladies we were standing next to before we were going to meet and hang out a little bit, one of them was talking how you changed her life with fasting and with different strategies and some of the books you've written and things like that. So I know that the reward is so much. It does feel like it drains you sometimes in that entrepreneurial life. Definitely, you got to have boundaries up, and
yes,
said, especially as you've grown a lot. But can you talk a little bit about your life before then as an NP, and you're maybe treating not necessarily the symptom, or you're just treating the symptoms and not really the causes, and now how you've had that shift and how you kind of help people. Do you see people get off medicine then a lot of times when you're helping them now?
I do. And so, the first part of your question was, what was my life like when I was practicing in traditional allopathic medicine? I loved what I saw. I mean, let me be very clear. I'm a total adrenaline junkie. Cardiology generally attracts very sick patients. I loved being in the hospital. I liked managing people in the ER and the ICU. And years ago, calling in a chopper to pick someone up and take them to a hospital where they had a cath lab. I really enjoyed that intellectually. And I really enjoyed functioning as a nurse practitioner. So you're part of a team. And I was very fortunate that I worked for a practice where the cardiologist treated me like a colleague and not as a servant, as I know some nurse practitioners or other advanced practice nurses do experience. And so I'm very, very fortunate. I learned a ton. But I think, for me, there were many years when my kids were young. My boys are now 16 and 14. When my kids were young, my husband did a lot of international travel. And I felt like I was a cog in a wheel. I would get up in the morning, we would have Mimi, who was our nanny. Mimi would be, taking care of the boys, or I was dropping one off at preschool or whatever it was I was doing. And I was literally just trying to think of what's the next thing I need to do. Whether it was at work or trying to get home to the kids or managing my husband's work schedule. And so when I reflect back on what my life was like, I don't think I was particularly fulfilled, because I just felt like I was doing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so part of that may just have been the stage I was in with very young children who are very labor intensive. And I've loved every stage that my boys have been, but boys are very active, as you know.
Yes.
They're active from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. And so, when I think about what my life was like, it was very regimented. It was intense. It was very stressful. I don't even think I realized how stressful it was, because being in an environment in a hospital where you're making decisions or collaborating care with very sick patients, you screw up, the results could be catastrophic. Thankfully, that was never the case. I'm very grateful for that. And when I think about, what was fulfilling about my job, I mentioned like the intellectual curiosity. I was always learning. I loved helping people. I mean, obviously it's from a place of service. I worked with great individuals, but there was clearly something lacking, but I didn't realize it until I could look retrospectively. So when I transitioned from getting up at 4:00 in the morning to go to the gym to do an intense workout, to go directly to the hospital or come home and shower, to work all day, come home and do round number 2, and not getting enough sleep year after year after year, when I look back on that, I'm like, God, that's no way to live. I mean, that's not an ideal way to be. And so, as I made that pivot from, being in a clinical environment to being an entrepreneur, I still embraced a lot of those traits. I still was getting up way too early. I was still trying to cram that workout in. I was still trying to be at my desk, to be working at 7:30 or 8:00 as soon as my kids got on the bus.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize, I had one of my first business coaches, and she had said, the most important thing you can do as an entrepreneur is A, create boundaries, and B, make sure you put self-care as a priority. And so I was like, well, yeah, I do the self-care. And she's like, no. You don't book anything in your schedule until 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the day, so that it allows you the time to take your shower, have your tea, go outside, connect with nature, get your workout in, do an errand, do all those things so that you are really ready to serve others. And so my day now looks very different. I don't get up obscenely early unless I have travel plans or I need to be up really early. I'm a whole lot kinder to myself. I make sure I get the sleep in that I need. So we were talking about, the boundaries piece that's so important. I tell my team, you can text me after 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. I won't respond because my phone's in airplane mode. And so I think that, even with our clients, we train our clients, like if you're responding to emails every night at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, they're going to expect you to respond. So I try very hard not to respond to things until the following day, unless I absolutely have to. If someone's struggling or there's a problem or an issue. But the other piece is now I'm in a position in my business where I can coordinate, I can work with other healthcare professionals. So before I was writing prescriptions, and now I talk to people about sleep and stress management, and we do diagnostic testing. I do work concurrently with other physicians, nurse practitioners, et cetera. But I get to be kind of the person that sits back, and I'm adding to the care that they're receiving, but I'm not the only person responsible. And so a lot of the things that I emphasize in my work with women are things I wish I had known more about in my 20s and 30s, because they do impact your health as you get into your 40s and 50s and beyond. So my day is structured very differently. My kids know I oftentimes work on the weekend, even if it's for a couple hours. I'll tell them, I got to prep for a podcast on Monday, or I've got some, tangential work I need to do. And so now my days are a little more flexible, which my kids enjoy. Like I'm always here when they get home, unless I'm traveling. And if I need to run something to the school in the middle of the day, which thankfully doesn't happen often, I can do that. Whereas before, trying to get off in the middle of a workday was such an inconvenience to the practice, because they either had to move people around or move patients around. And so thankfully, I feel like my time is, I have to be very efficient with my time, and I have to be very diligent about where I put my focus, because it's very easy, as you know, that you can fall down the rabbit hole of being on social media. And yes, we all check in on social media, but before you know it, it's 2 hours later and you're like, where did all that time go? And so just being deliberate about your intention and being deliberate about where your attention goes is really critically important. So I would say those are like the big things. I mean, I would say one of the other really nice things is now I really enjoy traveling. And so because I am my own boss, I can decide when I work and when I don't work. And obviously I do a lot more working than traveling, but integrating travel into business has been like one of the most enjoyable aspects of my work. Having the freedom to be able to say, okay, I have to be at a talk in Scottsdale on Friday. And so, the business adjusts accordingly. It's very fluid. It's very organic. And I'm sure for you, even as your business grows, you'll see that, things start to fall into place the way that they're supposed to.
Yeah, that's awesome. So many nuggets of wisdom there. I'm probably going to go back and watch that a few times and take some more notes, because I do think, when I left managing a bank, I was just, if I'm honest, very scared. I wanted to work 24/7, so I never had to go back there.
Yeah.
And definitely for the first few months, I fell into that trap of, I traded a 45-hour work week for like a 90-hour work week. And then, I finally got to the point where I talked to my wife and said, I've got to put some healthier boundaries on this, right? I can't just say yes to every client. I can't just say yes to every opportunity. I've got to really get more focused and decide where my attention is going to go, because we only have so much. And I fell into that trap too. You were talking about you can justify, well, I'm on Twitter, it's for business, I'm growing. Well, that's 2 hours of your day, like now I have very defined times where I'm on Twitter and defined times where I'm not, things like that. So.
Well, and it's funny. I now have a team to be able to manage social media, and they know that I will check in the morning. Like when we have active groups running, I always check in the morning, and that's my check-in time. Like check the box, Cynthia's run through things, check things out, and then I'm off the rest of the day. And, I will check in on Twitter because my team doesn't know what to do with Twitter. They're like, we don't know we'll post on Twitter, but we don't want to respond to anything. And I was like, that's fine. But for me, it's really, it's like a hot potato. It's like the potato's hot. I have the potato in my hands and I'm getting rid of it. And that is my mentality, that I recognize it's a necessary evil. If you're an entrepreneur, we have to be on social media, but I want to use social media to my advantage and not the other way around. And so I think it's very important. They make these apps as addictive as possible so that you want to stay on them longer. And, from my perspective, I try to be really so deliberate with what free time I have that, oftentimes what ends up happening is if I'm going to devote more than 5 or 10 minutes to something on social media, it's like, how is this serving me? That's number one. And number two, having boundaries. So if someone steps way over the line and they're just rude, I don't even interact with them. It's like, you just get blocked. Like energetically, you're not in alignment with where I am as a human being. You can disagree with me. I completely respect that. And I think that's important that we agree to disagree on occasion. But some people on social media are just vomitous. I mean, there's no other way to put it, just
angry.
vile.
You don't even know what they're yelling at. They're just
right.
You're their target here, then there's a target over here, and there's a target over here. It's not even personal. Yeah. They're just angry people, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting because you think about, for me, I go back to like my nerdy science side, and it's like, what's driving that behavior? And so you think about, we're still in the midst of a pandemic and people are stressed. And so, we have our frontal lobe is what helps us make good decisions. And people that are stressed and angry cannot make good decisions because their amygdala, which is their lizard brain, overrides their prefrontal cortex. And before you know it, people are like, they're keyboard warriors because they just can't mitigate thinking thoughtfully. And I think that is a huge issue. So I think that's a huge contributor. But people like that, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to make this really easy. You won't be able to see my stuff anymore. So
if it bothers you that much, you just don't look at it.
Right? Exactly. It's like judicious use of blocking is a healthy activity.
I definitely agree with you. Yeah. I actually just received a hate letter, my first one.
No.
My former high school classmate, they say. It was like a 4-page written thing. But they said they followed me on Instagram, Twitter, read my newsletter, bought my ebook, one of my ebook. And so I'm like, just click on follow. Like, what if you don't like the stuff I'm saying? Just don't follow it.
Wow. But think about the mental and emotional energy to write a 4-page letter. Like so to me, right? And it's like one of those things where I just think someone's not mentally well because that's not what a normal adult does. A normal adult would say, you know what? This content, maybe I get too many emails. It's nothing about this person. I just get too many emails. I'm going to unfollow. I'm always like, great, unfollow. That's completely reasonable. But don't, no one needs a vomitous diatribe. No one needs to post their stuff on, whatever social media network they're most active. It humors me. And I guess from my clinical side, I'm like, I think someone's mentally ill if they're going to that's just not right.
Nobody winning at life wakes up to attack other people online.
No.
Sure. Well, you're just the opposite of that. And one of your tweets early on, because I had, I want to say 24 followers on Twitter or something like that when we first started interacting. And I'll never forget, you're one of the first people I ever interacted with. And you were like, I watched your TED talk. I read, is it Salt, Sugar, Fat or Sugar, Salt?
Yeah.
You recommended that book, and I'll talk about making you angry. If you want to be angry, read that book and it'll really open your eyes. And then we started interacting a lot, and I started playing around with intermittent fasting, and you were so gracious to answer even questions when I would respond to some of your tweets and things. And it really, like, you kind of blazed the trail for me on social media to show me, hey, you know what? You have hundreds of thousands of followers across all social media. And here's a guy who has clearly none, I'm just starting out. You were still helping me out, answering a lot of these questions. And you truly, and I don't say this lightly, you changed my life with intermittent fasting. I used to wake up and eat cereal and then have sugary Starbucks coffee and then maybe some kind of big carb muffin thing in the morning, and then wonder like why I was cranky with no energy, hitting that noon, 2 o'clock time. And I was able to change all that mostly in part because of you. And I really am grateful from the bottom of my heart. And I know I can see the smile on your face when you get to change people's lives. Can you talk a little bit about that? And intermittent fasting is kind of like, I would say you're a big specialty of yours, and kind of the strategy around that, how you came about all that.
Yeah. And thank you. And for anyone that's listening or knows me, I try very, very hard to genuinely interact with people that follow me on social media. I mean, I come from a place of gratitude, and part of that is taking time every day to, interact with people in a very genuine way. So thank you for that. And obviously it was a good decision to continue to interact with you and follow you back as well, because you have exploded in the past, I don't know if it's like 6 to 12 months, but it seemingly you went from a couple followers and now you probably have way more than I do on Twitter.
Well, I had like 42, and then you were the first one to ever retweet me, and I went to like 49 that day, and I was like, oh my yes, it's like such a big thing, you have none to get any is hard.
That's so funny. Yeah, and so it's that impact, and I think most of us that are there and are genuine are genuinely trying to impact. But yes, intermittent fasting is a bucket I kind of fell into 6 years ago, never realizing that this would be something that I'm now associated with and known for. And so being able to share good information with good people is always the impetus for doing so. And so I guess it was 6 years ago when I started intermittent fasting, and then I dove down a rabbit hole. And in my typical way, I wanted to see what other healthcare providers are talking about this strategy. And I, found Jason Fung and his book with Jimmy Moore. And so I read that book, and then I was like, okay, there's another allopathic trained person out there that really embraces this. Okay, I can think about it. And then initially I started doing it. Then I started integrating it into work I was doing with clients. And then, in 2018, I watched someone's video, and they were talking about how they were able to donate money they had made in their business towards helping, and I forget which country in Africa, but it was incredibly heartwarming. They were helping build houses in a country in Africa. And I said to my husband, I was like, I really would like to be able to do that. And he was like, what do you mean? And I said, I would really like to be able to find a way to give back in a very kind of constructive and meaningful way. And maybe for me as an introvert, doing a TED Talk is a great idea. And so that's really where it stemmed from. And, being an introvert, the thought of speaking in front of a bunch of people and committing something to memory, even though I'd done a lot of media and I've done, a lot of podcasting, doing it in an environment where I'm standing on a stage was a little overwhelming. And so in June of 2018, I decided that, yep, now we're going to do it. So I hired a team to work on the applications, which are long and kind of cumbersome. And in October of 2018, I was offered my first talk. And then in November of 2018, I started the process of interviewing for another one. I did my first one in Toronto, which was super exciting. It was a small venue. It was exactly, the first kind of venue you want to speak at because it wasn't overwhelming. Still stressful, but I did really well. And then my second talk was supposed to be in March of 2019, not realizing that the month before I was going to get sick and spend a long time in the hospital. And what's really important for people to understand is that I think when you come from a place of true sincerity. So for me, when I was in the hospital, my thoughts were, number one, I want to get home to my kids because they're still young. And number two, I'm going to do this darn talk. Because in my head, I knew I was very sick. I was in the hospital for 13 days, but I was like, I want to make sure my brain works. I mean, it was that simplistic. And when I got out, the organizers thought I was nuts. And so I ended up doing this TED Talk, which is now, 27 days after leaving the hospital, has completely changed the trajectory of my personal and professional life, and for which I'm very grateful. But intermittent fasting as a strategy is something that I think is so, so important, because we as a society have gotten so far away from eating the way that our bodies are intended to be optimized. We eat too often, we eat too much of the wrong food, we eat too much highly processed food, we don't get enough exercise, we don't get enough digestive rest, our hormones are a mess. And weight gain is really a function of hormonal imbalances. As much as the CECO guys and gals don't like to hear that, it really is talking about imbalances in hormones, things like insulin, cortisol, and sex hormones, and a slew of other things. And so for me, intermittent fasting is something that nearly everyone can do. Obviously, there are people who shouldn't do it, but from the perspective that this is a strategy that is so aligned with ancestral health patterns, food scarcity. Years ago, there were no refrigerators. And there certainly wasn't a lot of pasteurization. And so people had to learn to, eat what they could kill or get access to. And there weren't these hyper palatable, highly processed, nutrient devoid options that are now so common and so proliferative. I know you and I were talking about this, but I was just out in Las Vegas, and I always bring like beef jerky and macadamia nuts and maybe a clean herb protein bar with me in case, God forbid, I can't get any food. And so I tend to fast when I travel, but occasionally I don't get enough of what I need in my feeding window wherever I am. And so I get on a plane to head home, and I'm like, okay, I'm hungry. And it's one of those things where you just realize, like, the average American is metabolically unhealthy. The average American eats far too many processed carbohydrates and not enough animal-based protein and too many of the wrong fats. And it just contributes. It's almost like this domino effect. And on so many levels, I think if healthcare professionals were talking to their patients every single day about these things, as opposed to giving them a handout that says fats are bad, eat more plant-based protein, and, eat these highly processed, hyperpalatable seed oils, that somehow that's going to make us healthier as a society, we're really doing our patients a disadvantage. And so I always say, like, I'm righting all the wrongs, the things I didn't know enough about when I was practicing clinical medicine and talking to patients about nutrition, because I was pretty proactive about it. In fact, my peers used to kind of tease me. They're like, Cynthia thinks nutrition's really, like, she's cute about it, but I should have pushed harder than I did when I look back retrospectively, and saying to people, if you're diabetic or insulin resistant, you need to take this really seriously, and eating bananas and eating lots of fruit and, lots of like the processed carbs, like, and there were always people that come out of the woodwork that just triggers them, but eating cakes and cookies and pasta and rice, like those aren't the right carbs to be eating, especially if you've got an insulin problem. So on so many levels, I feel like my work now is really helping to right, in my mind, the wrong of not knowing as much as I do now about nutrition and eating less often. That's really what it comes down to. Like, I will die on that sword. I'm completely comfortable dying on that sword. A lot of other swords I will not die on, as we were talking about.
Right.
But I just think eating less often is one of the most important things you can do as a healthy adult. Like, even, and I get this question a lot, do my kids intermittent fast? I have one my 16-year-old, who is like nearly 6 feet tall and plays football and is super lean. I mean, he's like 150 pounds, and he will continue to gain muscle mass and weight, but he's my carnivore. I mean, he eats almost all protein. I mean, he just can't get enough. We laugh about how much protein we cook. My swimmer, who's 14, he doesn't like to eat breakfast. And so we've started to have these little micro arguments in the morning, because I'm like, you swim really hard in the evenings. I'm not sure I want you going 15 hours without eating. And he's like, you don't understand. I'm not hungry when I wake up. And so he comes home and he has a massive meal at 2:30 in the afternoon. And then he eats another massive meal at night. And some days I can sometimes send him out of the house with something in the morning, but a lot of days he doesn't want to. And I think that we as a culture need to stop forcing people to eat when they're not hungry. Like, that is so, so important.
Yes. And also, like you mentioned, the cakes and I mean, you've been at corporate too. That was my thing that drove me nuts is, we have 15 employees at my branch. It's always somebody's birthday, anniversary when they started, every day it's donuts, it's cakes, it's all these things. Just became normal to, you're bored, let's eat. You're bored, let's eat. We're happy, let's celebrate and eat. We're sad, let's eat, and yes, that the intermittent fasting just changed my life so much in that we're having that discipline too, and that self-control to just say, no, like, my eating window is only from 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock. That's it. Yeah. Boy, it's powerful in your mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also kind of checking in with yourself. Like, what's the reason for why you're choosing to eat? Like, Marty Feldman is an engineer who's done a lot of work with something called data-driven fasting. And I always give him credit for some of the things that he caused me to reflect on. And he talks a lot about, the kind of nonsensical mindsets that we all get into, all of us. We're bored. I don't feel like working right now. I'm going to go to the fridge. I'm going to go to the pantry. And so he works with a lot of glucometers and continuous glucose monitors, and saying to people, like, what is the blood sugar where you get hungry? And if you feel like eating, you check your blood sugar. And if your blood sugar is not at that trigger point, you don't eat. And there are so many people in this amazing Facebook group that I'm part of. And I'm really just there out of his own generosity. And I just kind of get a bird's eye view of what's going on. But people are like, oh my gosh, I was just bored. I wasn't actually like truly intrinsically hungry. Like, my blood pressure was 110. So I still had fuel in the tank and I wanted to eat. And if I had done that, that would have like not allowed my body to tap into the carbs I still had to break down and the fats that I still had to break down. And so I think there are a lot of people doing really helpful, insightful information, but it's retraining our habits. It's retraining our mindset around our relationship with food. And I think for a lot of people, food is a source of comfort as opposed to a source of fuel. And whether or not that's a byproduct of the environment you grew up in as a child, or if it's your crutch that you developed as you were getting older. And there's no judgment when I say that. I just think we have to be honest about what our relationships are. Like, I know I don't feel good when I don't eat good quality food. I just don't. So for me, it's not a hardship to eliminate certain foods from my diet and incorporate other ones. But I think everyone has to come to it on their own kind of timetable. Like you were saying, like, you saw, maybe it was my TED Talk or saw some content and we're like, okay, I'm ready for the message and I'm ready to implement. And some people, they're kind of ready for the message, but they're not ready to implement yet. And that's okay too. But it's acknowledging that sometimes we have to get outside our comfort zone to make changes that have a major impact on our health.
Yeah, that's huge. One thing I did after I watched your TED Talk was I just started being mindful of all the food I'm putting in my body, and I wanted to know how I feel after it. And so what I did is, for a week, I didn't change the way I ate anything. I just, about 10 or 15 minutes after I ate anything, I would write scale of 1 to 100, my energy level. And so that just led me to start noticing, okay, I'm eating this sugary cereal, and now now I feel like laying down on the couch.
Yeah.
I'm eating this sugary muffin, now I feel like laying down on the couch. Okay, well, now I'm eating this lean protein and veggies, and I feel like I can go run, like, so it's just really mindful of what you're putting in your body.
Yeah.
One thing you spoke on, that I think is so powerful, that a big takeaway from you that I've learned over the last year or two that you brought up was, when I wanted to look into this, I researched my friend Jason, I read all these books. You're just a lifelong learner. It's pretty obvious. You love learning. You love it. I hear people say this to me all the time. Well, how do you come up with content, for online? And I'm like, I'm not, I'm just sharing what I'm continuously learning. I'm sharing my life. And do you kind of feel similar in that way, where you're just always learning and then you just get to share that? It's not like, you're
struggling. I mean, if you were to ask my husband, because I'm prepping, for example, I have 2 podcasts on Monday, I'm traveling Friday through Sunday. So I have to do the prep ahead of time. And last night, I finished working. My boundaries were set. And we have a big island kitchen. And so one kid had just come home from football. One had just come home from swimming. So they were upstairs showering and they were going to come down and eat. And my husband was on the couch doing something on his iPad, probably watching a movie, because I was doing my thing. And we're watching something. We've been diving into this show called Dope Sick, which we can talk about. So to answer your question, my husband would absolutely say she's a lifelong learner. There are not enough hours in the day for me to listen to all the podcasts I want to listen to and listen to all the books and read all the books, either in Audible or, physical form. And for me, it's a good problem to have. Like I will never not be interested in learning more about any one subject. Like I'm always interested in learning more about nuances in fasting. It doesn't have to be related to anything related to the work I'm doing. So when it comes to social media, I'm constantly tweaking things, because as I learn more, I'm like, oh, it's like peeling an onion. It's like, now I know another layer. I can share this with more people. Because I think when you come from a place of education on social media or in newsletters, etc., it comes across being very genuine. Like for me, it's just sharing good content, because I recognize not everyone has time in their schedule or the bandwidth to be able to process as much information as we probably both do on a given day or a given week. And so I look at it as it's a blessing. Like it's a blessing that I have the ability to read and listen to podcasts. Like I just found a new podcast, and I was telling my husband this morning, because this is one of those great things we do, is every day we walk the dogs for 2 to 3, 4 miles, depends on how much time we have. And I was saying it's like a Peter Attia podcast. So are you familiar with Peter Attia?
I'm not.
Okay. So he's an MD. He actually trained at Hopkins, where I trained as well. I did not know him at the time, but he has a podcast called The Drive. And it is, for me, it can allow me to nerd out on the science, but he also presents information in such a clinically accessible way for everyone. Like he actually did a podcast around 9/11 and specifically referenced this author with this book talking about some of the things that went on with 9/11. And I know I'm getting off on a tangent, but the point of why I'm sharing is that I was saying there's another person out there like Peter Attia. And so I just found this other podcast and I was like, now I'm down that rabbit hole. And so when I'm in the car, I don't necessarily listen to music. I'll listen to a podcast. I'll listen to Audible. And that allows me to kind of, it's like I'm spending time on stimulating my brain and learning, as opposed to like mindless fluff. Now I will get to the mindless fluff, because I know you are anti Hulu, Netflix, all that stuff.
I'm not
However,
anti, I just don't do it, but I'm all for
yeah,
everybody else doing it. But
yeah,
I
no,
used to have a
there's,
problem with it. So
yeah, no. And so the reason why I wanted to share this context. So there's a book called Dope Sick talking about the opioid crisis in the United States, which I did not realize even as a healthcare provider how bad it is. So I read that book, and the book again made me angry and irritated. And so now there is a Hulu series off of that book, and it is so disturbing. And so I encouraged my husband. I said, I know you're not going to read the book, but you should watch this series. And it's like 4 or 5 episodes. So it's not super labor intensive. But the reason why I'm sharing it is sometimes people need different avenues to learn. And so it's like figuring out what is your best avenue. Like I knew my husband would not read that book, even if I begged him to. But I was like, this is an important problem that you need to learn more about. And so, okay, now he's going to watch the docu-series that's been created. But it's definitely one of those things where I agree with you. I will be a lifelong learner. You will be a lifelong learner. The most important thing is, do you take what you learn and apply it? Right. That is a missing piece for a lot of people. Like they'll read the book, which is awesome, but then they're not in a position, they don't want to apply it, or they don't want to think about it. And I think it's important that we push ourselves outside of what was familiar. So the whole cognitive dissonance, there's a lot of that right now in the world. And so I will read, like I have a book in my car, a physical book. It's called The Plant Paradox, which I have not really gotten into yet, but it talks a lot about anti-nutrients and things in plants that can make it harder for us to digest them and assimilate them. And so it's on my list of things to do. But I think for all of us, it's creating the time, like prioritizing it. So you have to actually make the time to do it. And then are you going to take what you apply and share it in a helpful way, like I know you do, or apply it to your personal life if it's self-improvement? Like, I don't know about you, but do you have books on Audible?
I tried for a while, and I just like to physically read. So that's part of every night. Like my bedtime routine is I map out my next day, and then I'm going to read.
Yeah. So this is going to show you how nerdy I am. So I have some books I buy that I want to physically have because I know I'm going to earmark pages and highlight. But then books, if it's more about mindset, I actually want to listen to them. And so it forces me to disconnect from whatever I'm doing, because I have a tendency to be a multitasker. And so I will sometimes listen to those types of books while I walk. If I'm by myself, if I'm with my dogs, that can be super helpful. So like mindset books are in Audible.
Yeah. That's nice. Yeah. Whenever people tell me, I'll have clients now that'll say like, "Oh, I'm just so bored. I don't know what to do."
Oh God. My kids know like that will trigger me in
that,
really like, bad ways.
Yeah. We're like the first, I think people take for granted, honestly, 50,000 years, there's humans have been around or whatever that is. We're really in the only time, maybe the last 50 years or so, we have so much knowledge. Any topic you're interested in, you can go listen to experts give TED Talks about them. Then you can find books on that topic that somebody's spent 20 years of gaining all this knowledge that they're going to give to you. Yeah. It's such a gift to be able to consume that. And my wife is really similar to you in that way. She's just a lifelong learner. One of our first dates, I came into her place and she was just like taking these Harvard courses for free, just trying to learn again. I was like, "Oh, why are you doing that?" She's like, "I just love learning," and I figured we were going to get along pretty well then.
Yeah.
I see that in my daughter now too. Every night when I put her to bed, she's 6, and she always makes the comment, "Daddy, I wish we didn't require so much sleep." There's just so much fun stuff.
I love that. Oh, that's great. And I think, if we can instill that in our children, like I was writing the acknowledgements for my book, and I keep in my mind, it's like, there's some other person that I haven't, I'm probably driving my publisher crazy. I'm like, oh, I need to make sure I acknowledge this person. And so I had written my first draft of my acknowledgements, and my publisher had it. And then I was like, oh my God, I didn't thank my parents. I didn't think my parents. So I actually, so that acknowledgement for my parents, because, you only have so much space to do acknowledgements. And it was like, to my parents, thank you for instilling me a love of learning and critical thinking. Like, what is the most valuable thing they did? I love to learn. I am my parents' child. Like, there is no doubt. And my brother, we are such opposites. And he always makes me see the funny side in things. Like, he forces me not to take myself too seriously. And so, just those things that you love in your family or your spouse, like my husband, I mean, I'm sure he just sits back and laughs at me all day long because, I'm the more intense, the more like, I'm the one that gets kerfuffled over like things. But I remember one of our first dates, there was like a word I just casually used in conversation. And my husband told my father-in-law, and he was like, I knew she was the woman for me when. It's like, she just taught, like, this is just part of who she is. Like, she's just very, just the way that she speaks. And I'm sure for you, you're like falling in love with your wife when you're thinking about the story of she's a lifelong learner and how you appreciate and embrace that too. And so both my husband and I are both, like I always say, like, we don't look particularly nerdy, but we are definitely enjoy learning. And that should be something we, encourage in our children. And I feel fortunate. Both my kids love to learn. They're both great. They're great students. They do question things, especially my second born. And he likes to question everything. I'm like, oh, he is so my child.
That's a good thing, right?
Yes, exactly. I'm like, I want you to critically think. I don't want you to go along with the mainstream narrative. That's not what feels right for you.
That's right. Well, can we talk a little bit about your family? Because I love following your family too. I've watched your kids kind of grow up over these last few years. They're huge now. Sometimes I'll see a picture and I'm like, holy cow. And
I know.
I know you and your husband are super intentional too. You just took a fantastic vacation, I saw. Can you talk about how you kind of balance that work life and family life and how you're so intentional and kind of some best tips maybe around, balancing those and being so successful?
Oh, thank you. Well, I think I think a lot of it is the choices we make in partners. And for me, I grew up with parents that had a very unhealthy relationship. They got divorced when I was 7, and to this day, they still don't get along. They've been divorced for over 40 years, and they still have a very unhappy. I mean, they still blame each other for a lot. I just grew up in that, and I was like, I can't handle yelling and screaming. And I actually, at one point, I think in my 20s, thought I might never get married because I would meet very nice people, but I was like, I'm not going to do this unless I really meet the right person. And so when I met Todd, it was very evident. He grew up very differently, but he's always been very patient with me. He puts up with my crazy ideas. I'm like, I think we should do this. And he's like, what? I tend to be the one who pushes us to do stuff outside his comfort zone, but he's always my rock. He's always my voice of reason. He's always the person that is like my sounding board, and I can bounce any ideas. That's a lot of times when we walk, we're just talking about our day. It's such a great way to connect. So I think picking the right life partner is important. Someone that's aligned with you on how you want to raise a family. If you do want to raise a family, how you want to spend your money. We prioritize travel, as you mentioned, that's huge for us. And I think just being grounded, like for me, from the very beginning, we always like to eat healthy. We like to exercise. We don't like to stay up super late. It doesn't mean we don't on occasion, but that and a love of travel was easy. And, he definitely had a very healthy upbringing with parents that had been married and were happily married at the time. My father-in-law has unfortunately since passed away. So, I think that's the most important thing, is picking the right partner and then having shared, values and goals. And then, I knew when I met my husband, he would be a great dad, but I had no idea how great a father he would be until I saw him with the boys. And so obviously we have all boys. My oldest is 16, which is hard to believe. He's a great young man, like just smart and kind and thoughtful. And, he's a lot like my husband. They look alike. I mean, it's funny. It's like they laugh at the same things. Like when they're on the couch together, if they're watching a football game, they have the same mannerisms. I mean, it's hilarious to kind of watch that. But Jack loves to read. That was something that from a very young age, he could, even as like a preteen and a teenager, he can sit and just read for hours and loves that. He is not nearly as, adventurous, I would say, as his younger brother. His younger siblings usually are a little more devil may care. And so my 14-year-old is a firecracker. I mean, it just barrels through life. I mean, he is, from the day he was born, a totally different child. Whereas my older son is a little more mellow and laid back. This guy's intense and could never sit still. And, he has, these are stories we're sharing because you have boys now. He fell out of a second-story window when he was 2 and literally had no injuries. Wow. He fell and broke both his arms coming back from a swim meet and had to have surgery. I mean, he is I always say, like, every gray hair I have on my head is from this child. But he's also a great kid because he is extroverted and like the life of the party. And but he can also be very serious, but he's very intellectual and very cerebral. And the older one plays football. The younger one is a competitive swimmer, but I feel like we have this great unit. Like we genuinely enjoy spending time together. And, like our love language is probably a combination of food and travel. Like I'm always in my mindset, like we just took a trip, my husband and I'm already thinking about the trip we're going to take for our 20th wedding anniversary. My kids and my husband and I are taking a trip in December, and I'm already planning something for next summer. And so in my mind, it's really figuring out like, what makes your family happy? Like, I know we enjoy spending time together. Obviously now with 2 teenagers, they probably don't spend as much time with us, but we're home together, we're together quite a bit, but it's really now finding opportunities to connect. Like that's important. Like during the height of the pandemic, when we were really essentially homebound, we started doing Legos and puzzles and board games, because you get to a point where you're like, I can't watch anything else on TV. Like I think my older son had binged every series known to man that was within reason. My younger son, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, has now watched all seasons of The Family Guy, which I'm not happy about that. Like when I found out that he was watching it, and granted, for everyone who's listening, I have teenagers, so it's not like they're 7 and 8, but I was horrified because all I could think of is the humor is like adult humor. It's really not kid humor. And so he like wrote up a whole list of things he learned from Family Guy that were substantial. And I was like, I don't know if I should be humored or horrified.
Wow, he should be a lawyer.
Yes, well, he likes to argue. And so we've said, if you don't end up being an attorney, like a litigator or, in a position, he wants to be an entrepreneur of all things. Nice. But for everyone listening, like every stage is for us has been wonderful. I, of course, like love looking at photos of your family because it goes by so fast. It doesn't feel like it when you're in the throes of it. But like now when I'm looking in the rearview mirror and realizing my oldest is going to be in college in 3 years, my youngest in 5.
Yeah.
And we're going to be in an empty nest. And, that's really sobering. So that's why I always say savor every moment. But I think everyone's, family is structured a little bit differently. We tend to be like, we like things pretty quiet in the house. Like I acknowledge, like, even though I have dogs and dogs can bark, but like, we like a calm environment. We like things to be clean. And it's amazing how all of us have kind of adapted and embraced things that are important to Todd and I. It all trickles down, like all those lessons that you learn as a child from your parents. I mean, you have that same trickle down process with your own children. So you can recreate things or you can create new habits. And so in my mindset, there's been a lot of new habits created because I didn't want to potentiate what I grew up in.
That's so powerful to break that cycle too. Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot off platform about that. How, mm-hmm. my father grew up with his dad was a war hero and a great man in many regards, but just wasn't the kind of dad there mm-hmm. for him every day, and never went to his baseball games or anything like that. And my dad was the one that broke that cycle and said, you know what, even though I can get promoted at work, I'm going to choose to turn that down so that I can coach my son and daughter at all these things, mm-hmm. be there every day. And I think, he instilled that into me so much. Mm-hmm. And now I get to carry on his legacy and sort of that, which is an amazing thing. And I know recently you talked, I don't know if you want to share much of this or not, but you made the decision to not drink anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And my father made that same decision, I think about 30 some years back, where he realized, alcoholism was a part of our family. I have mm-hmm. alcoholic tendencies, so I have to be very mindful. I can go out with a buddy and say, I'm going to have one cocktail, and then it's 4 a.m. and I'm like, let's take a plane to this place and go party. So that's always been my personality. So I have to be super mindful about that too. And can you talk a little bit about that, where you wanted to break that cycle?
Yeah. And so I grew up, I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. So my dad is a lifelong alcoholic, and many of his family members are lifelong alcoholics. And I knew pretty early on that there were certain things that I didn't go to my dad to talk about. And after 8 o'clock at night, my parents were divorced, so we didn't live with him. After 8 o'clock at night, I never wanted to talk to my dad if he called me, because it usually was an abusive diatribe, usually about my mother, which I didn't want to listen to. And then as I, got into high school and college, and there's certainly a lot of pressure on people to drink and, do illicit drugs and things like that, I never liked losing control, because in the back of my mind, I always thought about my dad. I was like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person. So, I did the obligatory, drank a little bit in high school, largely didn't drink a ton in college. I was at the time very focused on getting into law school, and I wanted to go to a top law school. And so getting good grades was important. And I was definitely, like, when I look back on my 20s, I'm like, I was a little too serious, but I didn't know any better. And, given the complexities of, as we're kind of working through childhood traumas, I turned out fine. But I definitely got teased quite a bit in college that I was not the person who liked to stay up all night. I was not the person who liked to party constantly. I would drink alcohol, but not excessively. And I mean, did I get drunk? Yes. Did I do it frequently? Absolutely not. Did I enjoy being stuck at fraternity parties because I was part of a large sorority? Generally, I didn't, because by 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, no one's making good choices at this late at night at all. And so I kind of stumbled through my 20s, and, socially, that's a lot of things revolve around alcohol. And so I was usually the person that was the designated driver. I was usually the one that was, thinking thoughtfully about making sure at least someone was sober so that all of us would get home safely. And then, when I met my husband, I just felt like there was no pressure to do anything I didn't want to do. And so from that perspective, he's always been very supportive. And certainly once he met my dad, he kind of understood this is a fully functioning alcoholic. Thankfully, my dad usually keeps himself under control. He tends to be kind of a depressive drunk, not someone that's acting out per se. And so, navigating my 30s and not doing a ton of drinking, got into my 40s. And then certainly with the pandemic, I was like, I've never really liked drinking, and certainly not excessively. And so for me, I was like, why? I mean, it was always a social thing. Like, I'm at a party, I'm gonna have a glass of wine. And so for me, I was like, I just I'm finally feeling comfortable at the stage of life I'm in to just say, it never served me. I never liked it. My brother certainly has always had a greater tolerance for drinking alcohol than I have, which is not a criticism. I think some people, there's certainly genetic tendencies towards finding alcohol more easily. I was always the person, I would drink a certain amount and then I would feel nauseous. And so probably physiologically for me, that was probably my body's way of just saying, okay, we're done. We're totally done. But for me, it's so much better just not feeling that pressure. Like, now I'm kind of like loud and proud about it. I don't judge people that choose to drink, but from my perspective, it's one of the very few things that will give me hot flashes. And otherwise I don't get hot flashes. It's a super sexy topic, but for anyone that's listening, what alcohol can actually do, and it impacts your sleep, is that it can dysregulate your blood sugar, which you're not going to make good food choices if your blood sugar is a mess. And the other thing is it suppresses the secretion of melatonin, which is the hormone that tells your body it's really time to go to bed. So on many levels, I just got to a point, I was like, it messes with my sleep, it messes with my blood sugar. I don't feel good after I drink. So why even do it? So that's kind of where it came from. But certainly my father's history of alcoholism has always kind of been sitting on my shoulder, reminding me, like, remember what your father did and said when he was drunk. And so my father's drink of choice is beer. And so for a long, long time, anytime I smelled beer, it was the association with my dad. So I was never a beer drinker.
Yeah, that's powerful. I remember that tweet. It went huge where you just said, hey, it's very culturally acceptable. You're almost weird now in today's society. If you go to a party, or I meet friends at a bar to watch a game or something, and I'm the only, and I don't really want to drink, it's just me at this point. A lot of times it's wasted calories, and
right.
I don't sleep as well. I don't have as productive of a next day. And so I just don't understand the point of it. Now, I'm pretty mindful. When me and my wife went vacation to Bahamas, and we can sleep till 10 a.m. the next day.
Correct. Totally different.
It's a different story for me, but
absolutely. And you have little people at home. That's what I, started off this conversation saying, when I think back to when little people get up at 5:30 or 6, you can't be up all late, late night partying, because you'll just really suffer the next day.
They're up at 6:15 no matter what. It doesn't.
I remember those days. Now my kids sleep until 10 on the weekends. It's like unreal. Like, my husband now and I will go take the dogs for a walk, and we'll get a workout in, and we'll come home. Maybe we'll even grocery shop and no one's awake.
One of the things you mentioned there too that has been really powerful for me and helpful, it was off one of your tweets, was are your habits serving you? And you need to be mindful of that. And sometimes I think we just do things because we've always done them. Why did I drink sugary coffees every day? Well, I've just been doing it for years. Why did I just cope with food? And when I was going to celebrate something, order a large pizza. Well, that's what I grew up doing. That's what we always do. And I wasn't really mindful until I really read your tweet about that. And then I created a thing where once a month, I'll audit a lot of the things I'm doing and a lot of the hobbies. And I'll ask myself that very question: is this serving my best life? my goals and where I see myself in a few months, is this serving where I want to get to? If not, I've got to be okay just saying, you know what, I need to replace that habit with something else. And so
Yeah.
I thank you for that, because you kind of opened my mind to that too. And that's something that's really powerful, that I think everybody should take a look at that, and not just be on autopilot and doing things because you've always done them, right?
Yeah, no, and I think it's important to give ourselves permission to change course. Like, we don't have to stay in a widget that isn't working for us. And, we got up and moved. We literally made a decision last year. We're like, we don't love where we're living. We've never loved where we're living. We kind of drove around a few places and we're like, would we want to live in a different part of the state or a totally different place? And in 3 weeks, we literally got our house ready to put on the market, and put it on the market. It sold in a day. And then we
Awesome.
started our journey of living in multiple rentals while building a house.
You guys were all over. I remember.
Yeah. Oh, it was
we were in boxes for a while.
No. And I think, so the point of why I'm sharing this is that getting uncomfortable is a good thing. Like, getting uncomfortable is a good thing. And I think we oftentimes, and I say we as a society, we are so comfortable that we're not growing. Like, you don't grow if you don't make yourself uncomfortable. And it could be something simple, like, instead of having that coffee in the morning, maybe you decide to have green tea, or maybe your goal is to get out and get 15 minutes of sunlight in the morning, or you go to bed 30 minutes earlier. I mean, something small, but we don't grow when we're stagnant. We don't grow when we're comfortable. So, we literally up and moved, and it was one of the best decisions we could have ever made. Like, we love where we're living now. Like, everyone is friendly, and we love our new home. And, we got rid of so much stuff. Like, that's the other thing. We feel so much external pressure to live a certain way, or drive a certain car, or, live in a certain kind of house. And we did all that. And you know what? It didn't make us happy.
Yep.
At all. Like, I actually tell people it is freeing. Like, we downsized majorly, and we still have a lot of stuff in our garage that we still have to go through. And so we're thoughtfully kind of deciding, does this need to be donated? Should we sell this? What should we do? But we got rid of stuff so fast. Like, we were like, sell a couch, fine. Never liked that room anyway. Like, just like getting rid of stuff that doesn't serve you. And that could be, philosophically, that could be psychologically, that could be, physically, materialistically. There's so many ways to spin that. Yeah. Oh, and that's, boundaries, people and boundaries, super important.
Yeah. Can you talk just 1 minute here about your book? You have so many. I want to say real quick, I'm going to link everything Cynthia does, and under under the title, I can't speak here for a minute of this. She does so much. I'm going to link her TED Talks. I'm going to link her books. I'm going to link her Instagram, Twitter, and all these good things. But I drink a lot of water. I'm gonna use the restroom real quick. Can you just talk about your new book for a minute? Because I was really excited for that to launch. It looks fantastic. I know the feedback's been great. There's a lot of people at your conference here in Vegas I was at that were pretty hyped about that too.
Yeah, thank you.
You can speak on that for a minute, and then I'll be right back.
Yep, sure. So the book is actually on pre-sale right now on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, as well as some other local retailers. And so it's Intermittent Fasting Transformation, Ive 45, and it's a book really written for women in intermittent fasting. And on so many levels, there are a lot of great fasting resources that are out there, but this is the first book that's really written by a woman for women. And so we dive into what makes our bodies unique, the hormones that we have to mitigate and navigate, what kinds of changes we have to look out for women that are at peak fertility years versus middle age and perimenopause and menopause, and how to address for that. And I'm super excited because I hired one of the best chefs in the business, who has delicious meals that are largely animal-based protein meals, but lots of delicious recipes, of which I've tried all of them. And they have my kids' seal of approval as well, but they're also gluten and dairy free, and just a really great resource for a woman that is looking to learn more about intermittent fasting and do it successfully. And then additionally, for men that are looking for a gift for a beloved significant other or a family member, it's just a great opportunity to learn more about fasting. So I'm so grateful that you asked about it. It's officially publishes on March 15th. But it is on pre-sale right now, and the response has been pretty tremendous. It's been exciting.
Congratulations. You hear that, Mom and Kelly? My sister, is probably going to be a Christmas present for you guys. So
Thank you. No, it's really exciting. And it's kind of, It's what came out of that TED Talk. It literally, when the TED Talk went viral, my team and I were like, we better create something. And so that was
How many views is that TED Talk had? It's like 10 million plus views, right?
Yeah, it's almost 10 million. My kids keep track. I don't, but yeah, it's serendipitous. So I'm very grateful. So
That's awesome. Well, I'm super grateful for you. I truthfully think of all the people, I created a Twitter account just to learn, number one. And I think anybody who's starting a Twitter or social media journey, you need to have that mindset. You need to go in and learn. And you're somebody who, truthfully, I've learned more from you and applied more of what I've learned to better my life than anybody I've ever come across on social media. So I literally thank you. My family thanks you. I have a lot more energy now, a lot more fit, and a lot more healthy mindset as well. More than just healthy body. It kind of all intertwines. But I just thank you from the bottom of my heart so much.
No, I'm so grateful that, this is one of those reasons. I was telling someone the other day that, when you can connect with people on social media and then have an opportunity to like have a substantial like friendship or, just the interaction, like actually being able to meet so many people in Las Vegas, I was like, wow. It's really cool. And as an introvert, it's like, wow. But it's such a cool thing. And this is one of the ways that I think social media can be so impactful in a positive way, is that it can connect like-minded people and they can learn from one another. And I love that you view and reframe social media from such a healthy perspective. Like, it's not an extension of narcissism like it is for some people. You're like, I'm here to learn, and that's your mentality. And so therefore that automatically, energetically cuts out a lot of other nonsense and noise, for which there's a lot out there.
It's the greatest tool. And I don't think people realize that if you're mindful of who you follow, man, I'm learning from you who's invested how many years, how many hours of study, and you're just sharing this stuff a lot for free. I've bought your, a couple of your books and things too, but man, you can get so much information out there just completely for free to completely better your life. And so if you approach it in that way.
Absolutely.
At the end of every podcast, I do rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Ask you 5 questions. Just give me the first thought that comes to your mind. We can get to know a little more about you. Is that cool?
Okay. Yep.
All right. Number 1, you're very well traveled. We know this. I enjoy watching you guys travel. Where's your favorite ever vacation spot that you've been?
Oh, I think Rwanda. I think people find that surprising, but it was the cleanest, one of the safest places we've ever been. The people were wonderful. The food was delicious, and seeing the gorillas was life-changing.
That's awesome. That's really cool. What's the most impactful book you've ever read? Although I might know this now from earlier.
Yeah, I know, The Unhealthy Truth. And I actually just interviewed Robin O'Brien this fall, which was like, I was trying not to be a gigantic dork. I was like, I'm going to suppress my like excitement and try to just be chill and cool. But yeah, it's a great book.
That's how I felt when I was meeting you in Vegas a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, that's very nice.
And to then tell you how much you've changed my life. I got to be kind of.
Oh, no, you're always so gracious. Thank you.
What's the longest fast you've ever done? And what was your meal to break it?
Do you want the honest answer? Unintentional fast?
Yeah, let's hear that.
Yeah. So I was in the hospital for 13 days and I wasn't able to eat for 10 days. And they gave me nutrition in a bag. So that was the first thing, which is kind of great. You don't even want to know what's in it. And I remember arguing with the doctor, and the doctor was like, Cynthia, if you don't eat, you're going to die. And I was like, okay, then I'm not going to complain about the soy-based garbage you're giving me. But I think the first thing they gave me was probably out of a can. It was probably chicken stock, but I'm not even complaining. It tasted like the most amazing thing ever. But my voluntary fasts that I've done have been probably 72 hours. I've just never been someone that wants to do a week-long fast or, 4 or 5 day fast. So 3 days. And I think bone broth is probably where I started, because I'm definitely one of those people, even if I do a 24-hour fast, I cannot sit down and eat a meal. Like my body's like, time out. So always something light. Like I always say, if I don't have bone broth, I might have like a piece of chicken, like just something really easy to digest. But I tend to be pretty conservative. So involuntarily 10 days, broken with probably canned chicken stock. Voluntarily 3 days, and probably I'm sure it was bone broth. That's usually like my go-to.
Got you and Zach Hommel, all about the bone broth.
Yep. I drink a lot of it.
Yeah. I'm interested in this one because you're so much over social media and you do so many things. What's the favorite aspect of your job?
Podcasting.
Oh, really? Podcast?
I actually, so here's a funny story. So when I started podcasting 3 years ago, I was a co-podcast host. And my friend who was a clinical psychologist, she was really the impetus for starting the podcast. She kept saying, well, this would be great. We should do this together. And probably, gosh, like maybe a little over a year of doing it, she just said, we're still very good friends. It was not a friendship problem. She just said, this isn't really aligned with the direction I want to go in. Mm-hmm. And I had to make a decision. This is literally at the beginning of like right before the pandemic. So maybe this is January, February of 2020. And she said, I really think this. And I said, that's fine. We parted podcasting ways, are still friends. And I had to make a decision. It was like, do I really want to carry a podcast myself? Because as you know, if you do it right, it requires there's effort and preparation. And so it was the best decision I ever made. That's because awesome. Each time I would reach out to people, and at the very beginning, you're doing all the reach out. People aren't coming to you and saying, hey, I want to be on your podcast. And so it was rebranding everything, because now it's not a co-chaired or co-hosted, it's one person. And it was the best decision I ever made. I grew so much because I think it's actually easier to host yourself, because you get to ask all the questions, and I was able to take the podcast in a completely different direction. And so for me, I would say podcasting is easily my favorite thing I do. Now that I can monetize on the podcast, I'm even better, because I'm making money while I'm podcasting. This is awesome.
That's got to be a good feeling. Hope to get there.
Yeah. Too. Yeah, you definitely will. And I think, it's also leveraging relationships. That's one of the things I love about Twitter so much. Quite honestly, my team kept saying, do you really need to be on Twitter? They were asking me this recently, and I said, I'm telling you, some of the best connections I have made professionally have been through Twitter. So the question is always yes. It's much easier to kind of get a sense of what someone's about on Twitter than it is on Instagram. Instagram is great because it's a very visual medium, but I think you get to see different sides of people's brands and personalities. So yeah.
Twitter's just a brain dump. That's the cool thing is I don't even plan 90% of my tweets, 95 probably, so you're just, whatever you're thinking, you put out there, you really, you know who somebody is for sure.
Yeah. Totally. That's also why you have to be careful what you say, because it's sometimes things can be misinterpreted. Yes. I made the mistake one time of stating something that I'm sure was construed as a political statement, and I tend to keep my social media free of political stuff for my sanity. And the comments were so nasty. I was like, wow. And even people DMing me I can't believe you've got this great platform. I can't believe you just wasted it by expressing an opinion. And I was like, well, technically it's not political, but that's how you're viewing it. And so I was like, note to self, I deleted the tweet, and I was like, I will never do that again. For my sanity. I was like, I don't need to read things like that. It's not healthy for me.
It's crazy when tweets go viral and then you get 50 DMs from people that are just attacking, and you're like, man, just go for a walk. I respond to some of them, and I'm like, just go for a walk, put on some good music, call a loved one. You don't need to worry about this. This is my view. It's okay if it's not yours. Yeah. Or, it's a 230 character tweet. I can't even give you every layer of everything I think. I'm just putting a thought out there,
Yeah. Or it's the people that send you DMs and they expect you to give away proprietary content. I'm like, no. I was like, my podcast is free. My blog is free. My social media content is largely free. I'm like, knock yourself out, but I'm not going to just sit here and respond to you like you're a one-on-one client.
Because that's all you could do. I mean, I probably have 250 unopened DMs at this point, because wow. I just can't get to it. And I apologize for anybody who's sending them, but look, if you're just asking me for what do you eat, what do you do? Well, I have an ebook that says all that. And, I tweet about things constantly, but I don't, I'm disrespecting my family if I sit there all day and respond to every single person. Right.
Yeah. No, those boundaries are important. I just delete a lot. I'm like,
Yeah. All right. Last one. I'm excited to hear about this one. What can we look forward to next? I know you just released the book, but any big projects you're working on or currently doing in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the book obviously is the probably the focus for 2022, but I think it's also expanding my supplement line, because it's funny. After the Megyn Kelly podcast, we sold out of all of my supplements for 2 months. Honest to goodness, we couldn't keep it in stock. Every time we would restock something, they would sell again. And my team's like, oh my God, what do we do? I'm like, order more. So I think it'll probably be expanding my supplement line, because that's done really well. I think just continuing to set the bar high with the podcast, just continuing to grow. I think we'll probably be bringing on more team members, which is exciting.
Nice.
It's starting to get to a point, like we're definitely at a tipping point where it's like managing a lot of humans can definitely be challenging because different personalities, and you were working in the bank trying to manage all that. But I would say I think I'm going to savor the book and what comes out of that, and planning more trips.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on all your success and all
Thank you.
continued success and blessings. Keep making us all better. And for anybody watching this too, if you want to look like Cynthia when she aged in reverse somehow, one of my favorite aunts, Aunt Colleen, shout out to Aunt Colleen if you're going to watch this. But I always say that with her, man, she's approaching, I don't want to say her age, but every time I see her, I'm like, holy cow, what are you doing? She's very into fitness like you. She walks every day. She's mindful what she puts in her body. And
and that's really the
if
key.
you take care of yourself, it's possible.
Yeah, no, and I think, Tyler, for anyone who's listening or watching for that matter, I think that it's the limiting beliefs that we embrace. Like, to me, I recognize what my chronologic age is. I don't feel it. I certainly don't have aches and pains or a lot of the unhealthy things that I see a lot of my peers are dealing with. And so for that, I sit from a place of gratitude and certainly appreciate the acknowledgement. But I think a lot of it's just taking literally the lifestyle piece. Like, how much sleep do you get? Do you exercise? Do you eat an anti-inflammatory diet? How do you manage your stress? Like, women in middle age do not manage stress well. Like, they have to have a resource of how to deal with, their stress. You can't just keep it all bottled up inside, and you certainly can't eat your way out of stress. That's like a very maladaptive behavior. So thank you for that. But yeah, I think a lot of it's happy life, being grateful, all those things are certainly super helpful.
Gratitude's the cheat code. Today was day 1083 or something in a row where I wake up and write things I'm grateful for. And you have a lens of that, and it just makes you appreciate life. I wake up like a dog. I'm just happy. We get another day. Let's go. And now I get to talk to you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And actually, something my husband does most days is he'll send me he'll send me something he's grateful for via text message. That's cool. Like, today I was grateful for. And so that exercise is really, because it could be something like small and mundane. I didn't even realize, like, oh, I picked up your stuff at the dry cleaners, and something simple. Like, I don't even think if you're on autopilot. I mean, you just do because it's your spouse, and the little things do become the big things.
Very true. You wives do. That's been one thing that's eye-opening for me now that I work from home. I'm like, you do that too. You do. Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that thing that you take care of. Oh, and you schedule all of our doctor's appointments, dentist appointments. You do all of these, like, being a mom, man. It's you're managing a household. You're a CEO of that. Then you're the CEO of what you do too. So it's moms wear a lot of different hats. I think for any husbands out there watching this, give your wife those gratitude texts, man. I try and write my wife at least one letter a month, just saying that.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I've been doing a thing too that's been cool on Facebook. I make it private, so just me and my wife can see it. We're the only two. And I'll post some pictures of that day, and I'll write up a little paragraph or two of just saying how grateful I am that she's a great mom, or that she did kids. And so that'll pop up in our memories too, for the rest of our lives. That's been
I love that. Yeah, that's a beautiful habit, and something you can reflect on. I love those Facebook memories, especially now with my kids being older, and they don't want their photos on social media. So I have to sometimes put like a graphic over their faces. They're like, don't put that on social.
Well, I don't want to take up much more of your time, but I so appreciate you coming on. Thanks for sharing all your wisdom with everybody. Again, I'm going to link everything of Cynthia's underneath, so please check her out if you want to become a better human being too. And again, this is Tyromper's podcast, No Limits podcast, episode number 7. Our favorite guest ever, Cynthia Thurlow. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
You go have the greatest day. Keep making us all better. All right.